The phrase New World Order isn't just a term, it's a trigger. For some, it conjures images of shadowy figures and secret societies. For others, it's just a fringe conspiracy theory, easily dismissed. But what if we set aside the conspiracies, the fear, and the speculation? What if we looked at the idea for what it really is? At its core, the concept of a world order is incredibly simple. It's just the name we give to how power, influence, and rules are organized on a global scale. It describes who's in charge, who makes the rules, and who enforces them. And whether we like it or not, that organization is changing right now, right before our eyes. This isn't the first time the world has been rearranged. In fact, it's the norm. Think about history. Every era has had its own distinct structure, its own world order. There was the age of vast empires, like the Roman or the Mongol, where power was concentrated in a single dominant capital. Then came the colonial era, where European powers carved up the globe, creating a system based on exploitation and resource extraction. After that, the world was split in two during the Cold War, a bipolar order defined by the standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. And most recently, we've lived through what many call the unipolar moment, a period of unrivaled American dominance following the collapse of the Soviet bloc. The key takeaway here is that none of these systems lasted forever. They all seemed permanent to the people living within them, but eventually, they all gave way to something new. World orders don't just collapse in a single, dramatic event. It's not like a building suddenly imploding. It's more like a slow, steady erosion. The process is subtle at first. Rules that once applied to everyone start being enforced selectively. Long-standing alliances begin to fray as national interests diverge. The international institutions that were designed to manage the system, like the United Nations or the World Trade Organization, start to lose their authority and effectiveness. They become forums for disagreement rather than cooperation. This gradual decay, this quiet weakening of the old structure, is precisely how a transition from one world order to the next begins. So, why is the current order, the one established after the Cold War, under so much pressure today? To understand that, we need to look at its foundations. This post-Cold War system was built on three main pillars. The first was the idea of globalized free trade, the belief that economic interdependence would lead to peace and prosperity for all. The second pillar was a shared set of financial institutions, like the IMF and the World Bank, and the dominance of the US dollar, which together created a predictable global financial system. The third pillar was a dominant security provider, primarily the United States, and its network of alliances like NATO, which guaranteed the security of many nations and policed the global commons, like the oceans. For decades, this system worked, more or less. But today, every single one of those pillars is showing cracks. Global trade, once seen as a tool for cooperation, is now being weaponized. We see it in trade wars, sanctions, and tariffs, where economic ties are used as leverage to achieve political goals. Access to the global financial system is also becoming increasingly conditional. It's being used to punish rivals and reward friends, turning finance from a neutral utility into a political weapon. And finally, the security guarantees that underpin the entire system are being questioned. Allies are wondering if they can still rely on old promises, and rivals are testing the limits of the old order's power. Nations aren't necessarily rejecting the idea of having an order. What they're really questioning is the fairness of the current one. They're asking, who truly benefits from this system, and is it still working for us? This leads us to the most controversial truth about the whole idea of a new world order. A new order doesn't mean a single world government or a global dictator taking over. That's the stuff of fiction. In reality, it means a fundamental renegotiation of power. The core questions are up for debate again. Who gets to set the rules for trade and technology? Who has the authority to enforce international law? Who bears the costs of providing global security and stability? The controversy, the tension, the danger, it all comes from this simple, unavoidable fact. Transitions create winners and losers. And history teaches us one very clear lesson. No nation, no empire, and no power block ever gives up its influence peacefully or voluntarily. The struggle over who gets to write the next chapter is where the real conflict lies. So what does this next chapter look like? Contrary to some predictions, we are not heading towards a new, unified global system. We're not simply swapping one dominant power for another. Instead, what we're seeing is fragmentation. Multiple, competing systems are emerging simultaneously. Instead of one global free trade system, we are seeing the rise of regional trade blocs, each with its own set of rules and standards, centered around different major economies. Instead of a single, universal financial network, we're seeing the development of alternative payment systems and currency arrangements designed to bypass the traditional dollar-dominated infrastructure. And instead of a single, overarching security framework, we're seeing a complex web of overlapping and sometimes competing security alliances. This isn't a picture of global cooperation. This is a world of strategic hedging, where nations are trying to keep their options open, refusing to put all their eggs in one basket. They're building a world with more exits, more choices, and far less predictability. When you look at it this way, the idea of a new world order loses its mystique. It's not a secret plan being hatched in a smoke-filled room. It's not hidden in ancient texts or cryptic symbols. It is unfolding right now, in plain sight, for anyone who is willing to look. It's not being declared in grand speeches at the United Nations. It's being built, choice by choice, in the trade deals that are signed, the alliances that are forged, and the technologies that are developed. Every tariff, every sanction, every diplomatic snub is a small move in this great global rearrangement. And perhaps the most critical thing to understand is this. The most dangerous moment for the world is not the final collapse of an old order or the establishment of a new one. It is the period of transition in between. It is this moment, right now. Because uncertainty is the environment where power moves fastest and where the future of the world is decided. Thank you for watching. If this video made you think, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. See you next time.